Welcome to the Black Box App Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem-based executive search firm East Coast Executives. Excited to be here today with Dr. Jamie Campbell. Whoa, this guy's a real heavy hitter. Associate Dean at the Smeal College of Business, Penn State University. All right, that's the pit in me, but I'm going to acknowledge that this man is at Penn State, but he's a Morehouse man, and we're going to talk about a lot of things today. Excited to have Jamie on the Black Box App Podcast. Jamie, man, welcome.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And you forgot the Bronx part, but we'll let that go for right now. But I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate the Bronx. You know, we definitely appreciate the Bronx. Put your X's up, everybody. But look, man, I'm excited to have you on the podcast for a lot of different reasons, man. You're out here doing some amazing things. Really, not only, just at the job, but just kind of working organically to advance racial equity. And I think that's an important piece of this conversation and all conversations for that matter. But let's just talk a little bit about your career journey.
Okay, so to get it started, as I said, I am from the Bronx originally. I grew up in the Bronx, 1974. But what's important was that I went to school in Harlem. I went to Rice High School. And from there, I was able to get into programs that were typically built for helping students who were single family, high achieving, these kind of things. But I took the opportunities, which led me to go to a talent search program at Columbia University, then led me to go to Morehouse College, where I did graduate from. And from there, I got to see so many different things. And when I would come home, I would always tell my buddies about getting off the block. And they thought I was talking about traveling internationally. I was just talking about going somewhere other than North and South Carolina, as we want to do during the summer. It was important to understand these engagements and see other Black folk doing things that we didn't traditionally see. Like when I got to Morehouse, it was the first time I really understood that Black folk actually were affluent. Like I actually met cats who were Black, were folks who were Black Republicans.
Okay.
I thought that was a misnomer, and that was just a mythological creature, like you couldn't be. But then I got to understand from their perspective why they were. But then I also knew who I was. And growing and going into that HBCU led me to meet people of different backgrounds, also to do different things academically that became important, which led me to go into Central Michigan, where I got a master's degree in education, which actually then led in turn to me ultimately being able to get a job here at Penn State, which led me to go on to get my Ph.D., which I did complete actually this year. So I completed in November, but graduated in May. So the ink is just getting dry. But
man, I love it.
Yeah, and then working as an admissions counselor for 7 years at Morehouse College, to working at the Nonprofit Reform Initiative Project Grad Atlanta, and then coming to Penn State, and I've been here for 17 years.
All right, hold on. Man, I'm just looking at the moves you were making, but I want to start way back, right? I want to start at this move. So you're in a program for rising juniors, seniors at Columbia, right?
The talent search program.
Okay. Then you make a decision to go down south to school, to Morehouse and an HBCU. I know Columbia had to have their arms around you, trying to say, hey, you might want to stick around and stay here.
So the reality was my mom wanted me to go to Columbia because Columbia was there, only child, mom's looking out. Dad really just wanted me to go to school, and I had my sights set on Annapolis.
Okay, really?
Yeah, I was going to do either Annapolis or the Air Force Academy, everything good. Charles Rangel actually was the one that wrote my recommendation.
Nice.
Everything was lined up until I met the recruiter. When I met the recruiter, he was so harped on my SAT scores and so much on, you're the only one from the Bronx that's made it this far. And I don't know. And when I got to the Air Force prep test, to be frank, I was the only African-American there. So I was the tallest one, darkest one there. And then it was like, we got to do the drills and they were like, oh, you can play all these sports. And I was like, I didn't quite feel it. And my talent search counselor was at the time a woman named Carla Beckford, was like, you should look at Morehouse College. And I only applied to Morehouse to get her off my back.
Okay. Now were you familiar with Morehouse?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. She was the one that said, you should look at Morehouse. And I had my godfather in my other ear talking about the military academies and how they treated Black folk and all of the different things to that. And ultimately, it was like, I still wanted to go. And of course, mom and dad were excited because they understood free tuition.
Yes. Yeah.
The naval recruiters from Fordham Road. I don't know how much you know, but like there was a naval office on Fordham Road. They came out to the house to talk to my mom, to talk about if I didn't go to the academy, to make sure I did the ROTC program, and talked about the scholarship and all that. I had been at Columbia for 4 years. And one of the things that they always told us was do something different. Don't just settle for doing what you had always been doing. So I thought about it, thought Columbia was okay. I knew people there. It probably would have been easier to transition to Columbia, but I knew Columbia. The idea was to go away to get a challenge, to go away to do something different. And ultimately started to apply to Morehouse and started saying, you know what, I think I want to go there. And I got it down to Morehouse and Emory.
Okay. Oh, so you were in Atlanta no matter what, though.
Yeah, I was going to be out there.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, Morehouse just had the better pull. And I don't regret it. Didn't the other part of the story, though, I didn't like Morehouse that first semester.
Really? What? All right. So talk to me about that.
Well, it was different. So we kind of talked about it a little earlier, but the idea was I went down there and I was expecting, like, I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting the parties like Columbia, but then being in the South and it always being warm and everybody being on the same page because we're all Black, and then not feeling that right away.
Okay.
That semester, I called my dad and was like, yeah, I'm going to transfer back to Binghamton. I'm out. This is not it. He said then at that moment, he said, look, you wanted to go down there to be a man. You wanted to go down there to get off the block, do some things differently. Give it the spring. I went back and I didn't have a care in the world. I was homesick, so I stopped hanging out, so much with kids from New York. But we still are good, but it was like doing different things, meeting different people. And in my head, I wasn't coming back. So I was like, well, I might as well have the best time I can have. I got selected to be an RA.
Okay.
I actually did better academically. And then in full disclosure, they had this thing called Freaknik.
Yes.
It was kind of fun.
Yeah. That's going to be another conversation. We're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, so I said, you know what, it's all right. Then I went through it, had my internship. And one of the things that I recognized about being at Morehouse was you don't really realize what it means until you leave. And so the idea of the weight that it comes with, the respect and responsibility. And granted, they talk about it all the time, but it was just about saying, how important was it for you to complete this? And then I went back sophomore year, and in full disclosure, at the end of that sophomore year, I actually met the woman that has been my wife for the last 23 years.
Love it.
So it is.
Now, did she go to Spelman, Clark? Like, where
she went to Clark.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
She went to Clark Atlanta University. She's a graduate of Clark Atlanta University. And she and I met at the end of that year and dated, but, have been married since. So when you're talking about that aspect of the journey, and Columbia is saying we want, because remember, Columbia, NYU, both had those HEOP programs, both had those diversity incentive programs, which I could have been a part of. For me, it was a better fit to go to Morehouse. And even with my buddies, my buddies went to Binghamton and RIT, both great schools, and it worked well for them, and they're doing well. But for me, Morehouse helped me get me on the path to where I am.
I think it worked well for you as well. I think you figured it out. Hey, real quick. Then now, were you in ROTC? Like, did you go that route? No, you just
never did. I never did ROTC. I was able to get a scholarship from a program called the Clark Foundation in New York, actually, the Clark Foundation there, that helped pay for my tuition while I did. You had to keep the GPA, but would help pay for it until graduation. And then I was able just to stay forward. Like, I did consider it at one point, but it just didn't have the same appeal after talking to that recruiter and how I felt, because what I remember the most was the idea of tokenism and how it felt to be like you're just getting through. Now, Mr. Rangel did not make it feel that way.
Okay.
You have to go through those individual interviews. I had the one interview at a library in the Bronx, and then I had another one right for the Air Force Academy down there on Grand Central, right across from Grand Central.
Right.
And just listening to how they were talking and how they viewed it, I was like, I don't know if this is for me or if this is just what they're saying we have to fill a quota.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant a lot when you knew you wanted to be there. So that was just the aspect on that. But I think a lot of my buddies did the ROTC program. At Morehouse, we had a ROTC chapter, and they still were good. And I think it's one of the highest things you can do to serve.
Sure.
This wasn't for me.
You know, it's interesting, and I think this about a lot of people. I think there are people out here that they were going to make it no matter what. You were going to find your way through. So in speaking about finding your way through, Dr. Campbell, how did it get there? When did you make that decision? Like, you know what? I'm just going to keep this train moving and be all that I can be in it. No, not to have a military.
Yeah. No, I think it was from the beginning, because when I graduated from high school, the idea was always like, both mom and dad were like, you're going to be the first one, you're going to go to college. Like, and I did have one of those moms that said, look, if you bring in these grades home, you can come home and do this here. Mm-hmm. So there was that. Like, even my sophomore year, where I knew I was going to graduate late, and I went back and told my dad, he was like, are you going to graduate?
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So the answer was yes. So there was that support. So there was always a support system.
I love it.
And I'm looking back at the picture behind me that I can see. That's my dad and my uncle in that corner. And the both of them were in that support, like to make sure that I got through and make sure that I was pushing forward. So it was never an option, no matter how tough it was, to look back and say, I can't. It was more of an option to say, all right, this is going to be challenging, but I must. So that was there.
You know, let's talk about this. I want to dive here, and I don't know if we've went here yet in the Black Box Act podcast, but I think it's an important conversation, especially for Black men. Now, you made note of your father and your uncle back there, and you work with Black men, and you're a father, but do you find that when you come across Black men that may not have those two people behind their shoulder like yourself, that you have to put on a different hat or look at it in a different lens to add support and maybe even guidance to kind of their career journeys?
I don't think so. I think sometimes when you don't have support systems, you're looking for support systems. For Black men, African-American men, as we look for support systems, we're trying to make sure that we're not either being taken advantage of or being mistreated. We're trying to make sure that the individual, even if it looks like us, is not someone coming in to try to profit off of us or trying to make us feel less than. We are in those states of trying to seek out mentors and advisors, but not necessarily sure how to gain them, because we may not have seen them in a positive light so much. So for me, when I'm dealing with other African-American men, and we talked about previously about Black Male Leadership Symposium, which is one of the organizations I advise, they're not necessarily looking to figure out, they're looking to see if I am going to be supportive and if I'm going to be me.
Yes.
One of the things that even when earlier when we were trying to get set up and I was trying to put the backgrounds up and you were like, just leave it be yourself. And one of the things that we always say is bring your whole self. Mm-hmm. In order for me to be a good and strong advisor, I always have to bring my whole self to work. So when my guys come in, they know that they're my kids. And I refer to them not as my students, but as my kids.
Sure.
That they understand that they're with me, I'm with them. And we engage on that level. So it's not different, but it is making sure they understand and they see me. And not only do they see me, but they see me in the office, shirt and tie, but they see me in hood and boots. They see me with my daughters. They see me with my wife. It is that example that we talk about. We not only talk about for our, how we say, oh, well, we have to show them how to be, mm-hmm. right? We have to show them how to live, how it's important to be in all these spaces. And my guys, they see me with my daughters. Like I keep pictures in here, but they see me out in the street with them. They see me driving the minivan. They see me out there with them doing the Girl Scout cookie stuff. I do that. Hopefully they will see that and they'll see, okay, if they haven't seen it, they'll know this is expected of them. Because when we talk about being men, we often let it go with just the work. It's more to being a man than that. You've got to take care of the family. You've got to make sure that you're a qualified example. Because for those folks coming behind you, they've got to see you doing it.
Definitely. All right, so you're sitting up at Happy Valley, you're sitting up at Penn State, so I have to talk about this now because you took me here, and I didn't see us going here, but let's do it. So all the talk right now with Coach Prime, and he speaks about his athletes being his kids, right?
Mhm.
Two of them really are his kids, but he
Right,
speaks
right,
about
right.
them being his kids, and I'm hearing you speak of that. But so when I used to do counseling and stuff, we talked a lot about counter transference, right? And I'm just wondering, at what levels, how do you release that? Like, I know you build some really close relationships, and all of them probably can't be everlasting, but how do you say, all right, Simba, you're ready to go out here into the jungle?
So, but it's like what you say, right? It's what you're doing with this. So with this podcast, right? You're sitting down, you're talking to Black men, figuring out where they were. All of our stories are different, but we're all at some level of success. We're saying, here's what we did. You're pushing it out there so that they get it. When you talk, for me, sometimes it's graduation,
Yes.
like making sure that they walk across the stage.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are other times where it's like, okay, how am I going to get you to that next job? How am I going to get you through that first job? Letting them grow and letting them go and come as they need. So when I say they're my kids, it does mean that, because they're my responsibility.
Sure.
But then it becomes that uncle situation. So you get to be the good uncle, right? Because they only you don't have to discipline, but you get to talk and you get to say, okay, well, I did this. And you get to tell them what they did wrong. And then hopefully they'll take it and move forward and give it to somebody else. So yeah, so these are my kids, these are my guys, these even the women that come in the office that are students, like these are my kids, because when their parents drop them off, part of that trust is there's going to be somebody that's going to take care of them.
Yes.
And to your point, we can't take care of everybody, but the ones that come through, we got to wrap arms around. And especially at places like Penn State, right? We know that it's a PWI. We know it's a smaller population of diverse students, African American, Latin students, Asian students, students of different orientation. We have to be in that position where there's at least one space where they feel comfortable. And so if we can do that, I'm good. If I can get them to graduation, I'm great.
So all right, let's lead here. So these are standard questions on the Black Box App podcast.
Yeah, we haven't gotten it.
No, you actually took us right to where we needed to be. So I can appreciate that. As you advise these young men and women, they kind of come through some of the programming there and they're looking to get out into their career. What advice do you have for individuals that are entry level in their career? What should they be doing to make sure that it works out or that they're in the right place?
So I think the first thing is learning and understanding the culture. The organizational culture is something that's going to take you through the first 90 to 180 days of that assessment. Meaning, when you get into it, how does everybody feel? How does everybody talk? Doing some of those things outside of the comfort zone, going to those wine and cheeses, going to those happy hours that you really don't want to be bothered with. And for us, a lot of times, especially Black men, we say, all right, I'm going to go, but I'm going to just go and leave. No, go and have those conversations, organically find those mentors, because there are people there in that room that could be supportive, but we don't do it or we don't know to do it. So within that first 90, 180 days, you learn your job, you start to learn the systems, get involved with the ERGs or the employee resource groups, get involved with those affinity groups so that you can have things to talk to. Most organizations will have some type of affinity group that will reach out. You can usually find a mentor there, or you can find someone who will be willing to talk to you outside of your department. Making connections outside of your individual departments will be something that will help you to push forward.
Yeah, I definitely think, the ERGs are there for a reason, but also I think people don't understand when they're early in their careers that most careers or professions have professional organizations, right? The National Association of Black Accountants, NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. So things of that nature. All right, so let's get past that. I'm mid-career now. I'm 5 to 7 years in, feeling really good, making a little more money. But life is lifing, right? Because typically about that time, life is going to life.
Family comes along,
Yeah, right. So what should young men, young Black men, be kind of focusing in on and doing to solidify their place organizationally?
So I think there's two things, because you said life is life.
Yes.
You have to look at it from the two streams. I think the first stream is professional, right? So the professional means what other credentials do you need right now to start getting ahead? By having the degree, so if you get the BS and then get the MBA, that's fine. But what about the credentials? More and more, we're seeing in organizations that you need to have specific credentials in your field or even outside of your field to make sure that you're staying on top of things and growing. And back to that professional associations that you talk about, getting in those professionals associations, getting certified there. On the other side of it, life is lifing. Now is when you're starting to hit that sandwich generation. So you need to start looking at things like, how's my family situated?
Okay.
Or if you want a family, right? Because you may say, no, careers first, I'll worry about a family later. Or career, I got to take care of my parents. I'm okay with where I am right now. Those kind of things play together because it impacts what happens in your professional life. You know, if you have the family now, you can't always go to the happy hours every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go home.
You got to go home.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go to school or to practice to pick somebody up to take them home. Right?
Yeah. You got, you have curfews now, so you've got to adjust. But you can do that within that work life. You can do that within obtaining those certifications, and you can continue to move forward by picking up projects. You can pick up different skills in your workplace. So you can be moving forward on your regular trajectory, but at the same time, you can be engaged with other projects. You can start to meet people and start to volunteer. Like, I can't stress that enough in terms of being able to volunteer to give back. If you start giving back mid-career, and I know what's coming next, but if you start to give back mid-career, by the time you're a senior, it won't be so difficult and it won't look like you're just doing it to fill space.
Got you. I love that advice you gave. We speak a lot of times at East Coast Executives and Black Box even when we're doing some of our career coaching, and we speak about individuals being T-shaped, right? So the vertical line is your core skill set. You're an accountant, right? But the T-shape, the horizontal line is going to be the stretch assignments. Hey, maybe somebody needs some help in marketing, but they need somebody with the financial lens to kind of look at it and be part of that project. Then you start finding other opportunities to add value. And sometimes that's volunteering. But either way it goes, you're getting and acquiring some skill sets and building relationships that will allow you to not only solidify your professional self there within the organization, but also to be seen as a solution provider to those that are working and maybe are sponsoring people outside of those normal mentorship conversations that can add some value. So I love that feedback. All right, we covered the middle management piece. So then you sit back and your people like Dr. Campbell and your people like Kenneth Johnson, what should we be doing and what should we be offering to the younger generation as it relates to professional development and career advice?
Well, I think this all, so I'm going to circle this back to you because I think it goes into what you're doing right now. You saw a need for this. This wasn't something that someone came and said, hey, I have an idea. You saw, based on what you were doing with East Coast, based on how you were coaching, you saw this next need for it. And this was something that you said, I'm going to take on to do. And so when we get to those high levels, because I'm not at your level yet. I'm working on it.
You're there, brother. You're doing it.
When we get to those levels, it's about being able to say, what am I going to do for a legacy? So when you create Black Box, you create a system of, all right, I'm going to make sure I've got people to talk to all these different spaces. Like the gentleman you were talking about earlier, where you said, hey, I need to get him on here so he can talk, because now you're talking about entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are the fastest growing market when we talk about people from underrepresented backgrounds and what they're doing, because they want to own their own business. So now you're at this level where you can impart all this knowledge. You're now at this level where you can actually have these mentees to say, hey, look, this is what I did wrong. And so as a mentor, as a person that's growing this, you're now looking down and looking at the scope. And when you talk about preparing your legacy, it's now that succession planning to bring somebody else up. It is bringing the next person up. So it would be Kenneth looking at Jamie saying, okay, hey, let's go here. It would be Kenneth talking to Brian, saying, Brian, do you know how to play golf? Like doing the little things that people may not have done for you that you have found valuable, but it's also being free to share your mistakes. We are quick to share our success. And so when somebody comes and says, oh, well, you always had it together. It's, no. this is what I did wrong. Like one of the things I try to get my guys to understand, I can tell you what I did wrong so you understand what to do right.
Sure.
Because a lot of times when younger folks look at us and they'll say, oh, you always were behind the desk, or you were always here. You know, they'll see the seasoning and then say, this is something you came into. No, this was something I had to grow into. I had to learn. And I had to navigate different spaces. So when you're at that pinnacle level, the idea of giving back and how you give back, doing those philanthropic things, whether it be at your church, a community center, or something, is important. And it's fulfilling because now you're putting your legacy out there. And now you're making that name for you that you've made professionally, but you're making in a global situation.
You know, I love that advice regarding offering people insight onto where maybe we haven't succeeded as well, right? We always we give the commercial, the success story commercial, but usually if you get to a certain place, you failed on the journey as well. If you don't mind, are there any books that have been, I guess, beneficial to your career?
I think the 50 Laws of Power, I still go back to Baldwin. The Baldwin books, like any one of them in particular, I think the Whistling Vivaldi. Oh my goodness, you can see I got a tongue back there. Whistling Vivaldi.
Right. No, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah. I'm still trying to think. There's like the Beverly Tatum's books, the Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together, and talking about that. There's books on like phenomenology, which is a research method where it talks about dealing with the using how you use phenomenon and working with people and getting them to understand and talk and being developed. So there's a ton of books, and forgive me for not remembering titles or authors and having all that together like that.
You gave us a good offering. I'm actually looking forward to rewatching this so I can pull some of that information down. Look, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on the Black Box App podcast. How do individuals in our audience stay connected to the work that you're doing?
Oh, sure. Well, they can always reach me here at Smeal. My email address is juc27. They can find me on LinkedIn as well. If you really want to see some of the stuff that we're doing in the college for diversity, you can always look at smeal.psu.edu/diversity. That'll take you right to the Diversity Enhancement Programs page where you'll see things about our speaker series, a current diversity audit that we just completed, and then just some of the other things that we're doing with our student orgs as well.